Hello, I'm Jan Donley. I've worked as an upholsterer here in Oxford for the last 30 years and as a teacher for 25 years, and I'm in the process of planning my partial retirement. I'm making a series of videos for my students to act as reminders of what they're going to do, but also for new students, new people who are new to upholstery, so that you can hopefully use it to get you started on this craft. So I'm going to run through in this video the basic tools that you need for upholstery, the basic materials and the basic techniques, which I hope will allow you to get started. So we're going to start off with the stripping tools. The first thing you have to do in traditional upholstery is to strip off the old upholstery, and to use this you need some stripping tools. So you need a tack lifter and staple removers and possibly a ripping tool. All of these are possible tools to use. You can also use just an old screwdriver if you haven't got anything else. This one I find is the best for taking out the staples, and this one for taking out the tacks. You use them all in conjunction with a mallet by hitting it like this to remove the old tacks. Sometimes a pair of pinchers is quite useful as well, especially with staples. The other essential tool is a hammer. So this is my hammer. This is a magnetic hammer. So with this one you can pick up the tacks and put them down into the wood like that. You don't have to use a magnetic hammer. You can use an ordinary small hammer, but don't make it too heavy, otherwise it will damage the frame. The first thing that's put on is webbing, and this is a webbing stretcher, and you'll be shown how to use that. You also of course need some scissors. I have a good pair of cutting out scissors, some quite big but sharp at the end snipping scissors, and a pair of snippers that are quite useful as well. The needles that we use in upholstery are quite specialised. We use ones with a point at both ends, and that they come in various sizes, so from very long to very small. We also use curved needles. This big heavy one is used for tying springs onto the webbing, and then I've got 3 different sizes here of curved needles, all used for various techniques. I also have a regulator here. A regulator is used for moving fibre around underneath hessian and generally sort of poking fabric into the upholstery. It's a really useful tool. A tape measure is pretty essential, and a measuring stick is also very useful for when you want to measure out the fabric. We do use staples in upholstery sometimes, and a heavy hand stapler is quite adequate. I use an electric stapler because I do quite a lot of it, and in the big upholstery workshops they use pneumatic staplers, but certainly that isn't necessary for amateurs. So those are the basic tools. Of course, on top of that, it's quite handy to have a good working table to work on, and trestles for putting the chairs on. So a set of these is quite useful if you can get hold of some. Right, to move on to the materials that are used in upholstery. The first thing that's used is webbing. This is black and white red stripe webbing, which is the strongest sort of webbing, which is really good when you're using it as a base hessian for seats, especially with springs. There is a jute webbing, which is a much lighter sort of webbing that could be used on the backs of chairs or somewhere where you don't need so much strength. And in modern upholstery, there's elastic webbing or rubber webbing, which has got a stretch to it. That's used instead of springs rather than in conjunction with springs. Of course, to put that on you need tacks, and we use 3 different sizes of tacks in upholstery. There's a very large one which is used for holding the lashing down for springs. This medium sized one which is used with the webbing, and that's 13mm, that's 15mm, and then the very smallest one which is 10mm, and they are used with the hessian and the calico and the top fabric. So if springs are being used, they're used on top of the webbing, and coil springs are traditionally used in traditional upholstery, and they come in various sizes, so from the very big to the very small. They also come in different gauges, different thicknesses of wire, so they're measured in the same way as knitting needles are. So the higher the gauge, the thinner the wire. So this is an 11 gauge and this is a 9 gauge. In more modern techniques, then different sorts of springs are used. This is a serpentine spring, and in Parker Knoll style wing chairs you get the tension spring, the long thin spring like that. So on top of the springs goes hessian, and there's two different weights of hessians that are used. There's a 12 ounce hessian, which is a strong base hessian, and a 10 ounce hessian, which is a lighter weight one. And if we just go over to this chair here, I can show you how these different sorts of hessians are used. The base hessian here is on the back, because that's nice and strong. And the 10 ounce hessian is used to make this shape that comes all the way around here. So this is called the first stuffing, and if I turn it up you can see how that's built up. There's webbing on first, there's springs inside there, and then there's the base hessian on top of the springs, and then this has all been put on top. For both of these stages, the seat and the back now, there's going to be the second stuffing needs to go on, where there'll be more fibre, something called cotton felt I'm just going to show you, and the fabric on top of that. So to get onto the fillings, the things that actually make the shape, in the first stuffing there and in the bottom half of the second stuffing we have either fibre or hair. This is a vegetable fibre, a core fibre, and this is some old horsehair that has been washed in a washing machine in a pillowcase with some detergent and fabric softener, and it becomes, you can reuse it. So if you ever strip anything off with old hair in it, it's always worth reusing. You can buy new hair. This is a mixture of hog's hair and horsehair, and it's also nice and soft. So the other fillings that are used on top of that are cotton felt, which is this nice fluffy stuff. On top of the cotton felt goes calico. Unless you're very experienced, you can go straight onto the top fabric, but for most people it's very useful to use the calico first, so that you don't handle the fabric quite so much. And on top of that goes polyester wadding, and then the fabric on top of that. So there's a couple more things to show you here. The thing that the twine that's used for here, this stitching twine, is a specialised twine again. It's a linen mattress twine, particularly produced for upholstery. The cord that's used to hold the springs down is called lay cord, and it's a much thicker cord. And if you do buttoning, you need a special twine for that. This is nylon buttoning twine, and this is used for buttoning because it's much it slips more easily, and it's much stronger for holding the button in place. The other thing that you might need is these. This is called slip-in thread. This is like a strong buttoning thread, and this is used in conjunction with a very small curved needle to do what's called a slip-in stitch, or a ladder stitch, which is finishing off the fabric, holding the two bits of fabric together. I've also got skewers which hold things in place where you can't hold them down with tacks, and I use quite big pins, not the usual dressmaking pins, but really quite big chunky pins, which are quite useful as well. Now when it comes to finishing off, there's various ways to finish off to do the decoration on upholstery. You can use decorative nails. There's 3 different sorts here. And sometimes they're used in conjunction with a nail strip. So a nail strip has got false nails in it, false nail tops in it, and then every 5 tops there's a hole where you put the real nail in place, so you get the appearance of a close nail finish. You can also use various sorts of braid or double piping. So there's lots of alternatives for finishing off, and of course there's a huge variety of top fabric. Just one more thing is the foam. You might find that you want to use foam. If you do use foam, it comes in different thicknesses, so you can obviously buy it in from anything from 1/4 of an inch up to about 6 inches. And it also comes in different densities. So the yellow one is a softer foam, useful for backs, and the blue one is a seat foam, so that's a firmer foam. All of these materials and tools you can purchase from me if you contact me, but you have to come to my workshop. I don't do a mail delivery service, but there are lots of internet sites where you can purchase upholstery supplies and materials. So I just want to run you quickly through the basic techniques of upholstery. The basic techniques are reasonably simple and straightforward to learn, but the skill comes in learning how to adapt those different techniques to different chairs. So that comes with experience. But basically the stages are here. You start off by stripping the frame. You then put on some webbing. You then tie in the springs and lash the springs. On top of the springs goes the 12-ounce hessian that we've just seen, which are then tied to the springs. And in some more complicated, bigger armchairs and sofas, you have front edge springing. Now sometimes you don't have springs in, so you go straight from the webbing to the hessian. So the hessian goes on top of the webbing. It's certainly with a lot of seats, you'd have what you call the first stuffing. So this is all the blue colours. So that's building up with fibre, 10-ounce hessian, doing the through stuffing ties and the stitching, as we've done on the chair that we just looked at. That is followed by the blind stitching and the top stitching. So if we look again at this chair, you can see that all those stages have been built up on the seat of this chair. So that's all called the first stuffing. What happens on there now and on the back is what's called the second stuffing, and the second stuffing creates the final look of the chair, the final thickness and fullness of the chair, and the final the way it's going to look with the fabric over the top of it. And in some instances like this back, we don't have any of these springs and first stuffings, but in most seats you'd have the springs and the first stuffing first. So the second stuffing, you do more filling, then the cotton felt goes on top of that, and then the calico, and then you'd put some polyester wadding and the top fabric. Sometimes you might have button in there. In some instances you've got to cut round frames, and then the top cover goes on. You may have to ladder stitch, and then you have the gimp or the braid or the finishing and the bottoming. So all of these stages are explained in much more detail on all my individual videos. So if you're interested in purchasing them, they cost £30 for the whole lot. For that you get quite a lot of different videos of big projects of armchairs, of prayer chairs, of small chairs, and also some soft furnishing of doing box cushions and scatter cushions. If you are finding this not via my website, then the way to get hold of it is through my website, which is jandonleyupholsteryclasses.co.uk. I hope you have fun with your upholstering.